Welcome to another edition of Discovering the Book of Mormon through Science and Exploration. Today we're going to visit Corral, one of the most important archaeological sites in the entire world. It was the spiritual center of what was the mother culture of all the Americas. Its pyramids predate those of Egypt. Archaeologists call it Corral. I'll call it Moron, the capital of the ancient Jaredites. Why do I make this bold assertion? Let me explain. The Jaredites left Sumer in Mesopotamia after the Tower of Babel. The Samaritans used burnt mud bricks and pitchum for mortar to construct the Tower of Babel. By carbon-14 dating these elements, archaeologists believe that the Tower of Babel would have been built between 3100 BC and 2700 BC. They believe that the tower was a large ziggurat or step pyramid. This slide shows the remains of a large ziggurat in Ur today and what it would have looked like originally. The Jaredite exodus eventually led them to the Western Hemisphere. The question begs to be asked, where was the early Jaredite civilization in the early 3rd millennium BC? And where was its kingdoms and cities? The Jaredites certainly weren't the Hopewell culture, whose first primitive settlements started around 100 BC. Nor could they have been the Olmecs, whose first primitive settlements date back only to 1300 BC. If the Jaredites settled north of Panama, this would imply that there's 1,400 years of missing history. A lot can happen in 1,400 years. To put that in perspective, think of what has happened in what is today the United States in just the last 400 years. Indeed, 1,400 years of artifacts just don't disappear. That's why I believe we need to turn to South America for our search of the early Jaredites. Where were the Jaredites if they settled in South America? Corral, the mother civilization of all the Americas, with its ziggurats like pyramids, is the only civilization that dates to the time of the earliest Jaredites. But did the Jaredites establish the Corral civilization along the northern shores of Peru? When the Jaredites left Sumer, the Lord promised the brother Jared, quote, "And there I will bless thee and thy seed, and raise up unto me of thy seed, and of thy seed of thy brethren, and they who shall go with thee, a great nation, and there shall be none greater than that nation, which I will raise up unto me of thy seed, upon all the face of the earth." In his book, 1491, Charles Mann notes that Corral was the ceremonial center for 25 cities along a 60-mile strip of Peru. He writes that, quote, "Taken individually, none of the 25 Norte Chico cities rivaled Sumer cities in size, but in totality was bigger than Sumer," end quote. In other words, Corral was probably the greatest civilization on earth and the possible fulfillment of the prophecy the Lord gave to the brother of Jared, that they would be the greatest nation. Is there any evidence that supports Corral as having been the capital of the Jaredite civilization? Perhaps. In my book, Discovering the Amazing Jaredites, I discuss the written and archaeological evidence supporting the theory that Peru was the land of the Jaredites. Let's first look at the written evidence. After the languages were confused, the Bible talks of Jerah and his brother Ophir fleeing to the land of Mesa and Zephyr. Historians have identified Zephyr as the land of Dofir in southern Oman, and Mesa as the ancient frankincense harbor of Korori. In Hebrew, there are several alternative spellings for Jerah. One of these is Jared. Indeed, in several old Bibles, the name of Jerah is spelled Jared, apparently the same person as Jared in the Book of Mormon. Biblical Jared had a brother named Ophir, who had a famous harbor named after him. If Jared in the Bible is Jared in the Book of Mormon, then his younger brother Ophir appears to be the Book of Mormon prophet called the brother of Jared, and his tie to the ruins of Caral is very interesting. In his book series, The Historical Geography of Arabia, Reverend Charles Forster, a lecturer at Canterbury, England, wrote that biblical Jared led his brothers to the Indian Ocean in Oman. This included Jared's younger brother Ophir, who had a harbor named after him in the area known today as Dover, where the natural harbor of Korori is located. Since Jared in the Bible was the leader of his tribe, they would have been called the Jaredites. In my book, I document evidence that the Jaredites left from the same harbor as Lehi, that is, Korori in Oman. Some historians believe that Korori was the ancient biblical harbor of Ophir. The LDS Bible Dictionary states that Ophir was probably a harbor on the Indian Ocean in southern Arabia. According to a survey performed by archaeologists from UCLA, Korori was the only ancient harbor large enough to handle large sailing ships, such as that of Nephi's. I have had the privilege of becoming friends with Omani historian and linguist Ali al-Shari. Ali is a member of the Ophir tribe. He has authored 15 books, lectured at Brigham Young University. He grew up in the tribal lands of Korori, and at the request of LDS Family Search, he allowed his genealogy to be digitized for the church's use. Ali claims that the natural harbor of Korori and its upper valley, with a river and waterfalls, are part of the tribal land of Ophir. In his book, The Language of Ad, Ali included his family's genealogy, which reaches back to Ophir, the grandson of Noah. The blue area in this map shows the tribal lands of the tribe of Ophir in Oman. They include the natural harbor of Korori, which many historians believe was once called the harbor of Ophir. Did the Jaredites build their ships in the same harbor that Nephi built his? Nephi reported that the land bountiful had been prepared by the Lord for them. The Jaredites brought with them honeybees and seeds. To keep the seeds fertile, the Jaredites would plant those seeds in their harbor area. Nephi called the land where he built his ship bountiful. According to Smith's Bible Dictionary, a non-LDS authoritative source for biblical scholars, Ophir means abundance. According to Microsoft's thesaurus, bountiful equals abundant. In other words, Ophir was the land of bountiful where Nephi built his ship. According to Hitchcock's Bible Names Dictionary, another non-LDS authoritative source, Ophir means a fruitful region. If the biblical Jaredites traveled from Mesopotamia to the harbor of Korori in Oman, they faced a major challenge. They needed to cross the great Arabian desert known as the Empty Quarter, a sea of sand dunes the size of the state of Utah. Now let's consider the Book of Mormon Jaredites. After they left the Tower of Babel, they needed to find a harbor where they could build ships. The Jaredites named their harbor after Jared's younger brother. Like the biblical Jaredites, the Book of Mormon Jaredites also had to cross a quarter of land that was empty. We read in the book of Ether, and it came to pass that the Lord commanded them that they should go forth into the wilderness, yea, into that quarter where there never had man been. The story of the biblical Jaredites and the story of the Book of Mormon Jaredites are so similar that they had to have been the same people, with the same story being recorded in two separate accounts. Indeed, the Book of Mormon seems to confer the truthfulness of the Bible, and the Bible seems to verify the truthfulness of the Book of Mormon history. The same seems to be true for Ophir and the brother of Jared. They must have been the same person. That is, Ophir went up the mountain with 16 stones. There he saw the Lord through the veil and was given a new sacred name that was not to be used in public. Thereafter, he was only called the brother of Jared. It would seem likely then that the Jaredites sailed away from the harbor they called Ophir. 344 days later, the Jaredites arrived at their promised land. Did they call it New Ophir after the great prophet who led them to their promised land? The Jaredites used names from their old world in the new world. The same is true of the Nephites, who called their cities Jerusalem, Bountiful, Ishmael, and Mulek. In more recent times, we have the English settlers who called their new lands New Jersey, New York, New Hampshire, etc. It seems reasonable that the Jaredites would have named their new land Ophir after the name of the land in which they left. Francisco Montesino, an early Spanish chronicler, studied the oral traditions of the Incas. He wrote that the Indians believed that Ophir settled Peru 340 years after the Great Flood, and that the name Peru was derived from the name Ophir. The Peruvians, he claimed, believed that Ophir was led by God to Peru and gave them commandments, but that they became greedy and terrible wars broke out. 4 other early Spanish chroniclers believed that Peru was originally the land of Ophir. The explorer Jean Savoy is credited with discovering 43 lost cities in the Andes Mountains. He has lectured at Brigham Young University on his discoveries. He claims to have found a King Solomon era icon of the land Ophir on 3 stone plates in Peru. If Peru is the land of Ophir, named after the brother of Jared, is Corral the Jaredite city of Moron? Corral is not the ancient name of these ruins. It was only given that name by archaeologists. We read in the Book of Mormon, quote, Moron, where the king dwelt, was near the land which was called Desolation by the Nephites. In his book, The Secrets of the Incas, Dr. William Sullivan notes that Lima, which we just left, was called by the Incas the land of the people of desolation. If Lima was the land of desolation, and Moron was close to it, then Corral seems like an excellent candidate for the first capital of the Jaredites. Let's now consider the greater picture of Jaredite geography. Joseph Smith taught that Nephi's ship landed in Chile in South America. President Harold B. Lee wrote, quote, from the writings of the prophet Joseph Smith and of other inspired men, it seems that all are in agreement that the followers of Lehi came to the western shores of South America. If Lehi landed on the west coast of South America, and the Jaredites lived for a time with the people of Lehi, then it seems likely that the Jaredites were also located on the western shores of South America. The prophet Alma noted that the land of the Jaredites was located in the northward part of the Nephite lands. This scenario fits Caral as a candidate for the city of Moron. The archaeological findings at Caral support this theory. First, we have the ziggurat-style pyramids of Caral that resemble the ziggurats from Sumer, the land where the Jaredites fled from. Like the Jaredites, the people of Caral had a written language. They recorded their words on strings called quipus. The civilizations on the north coast of Peru, including Caral, had gold, silver, and copper in abundance, including thin gold plates that date to the time of the early Jaredites. The native fishermen at Caral used unique reed fishing rafts to fish the waters of the Pacific. The same reed rafts are still used by fishermen in the lands of ancient Mesopotamia, the original homeland of the Jaredites. The Book of Mormon claims that the Jaredites had silk. The Peruvians were the master weavers of the ancient world. The word silk comes from the Arabic word silka, which means any fine woven cloth. The people of Caral had both cotton and wool. On the right are nearly 5,000-year-old cloth remnants found at Caral. The Jaredites had herds of sheep. The Book of Mormon states that they were rich in flocks. For centuries, the Spanish thought that the alpacas were a type of sheep. The Jaredites thought the same. The Jaredites had horses and asses. Not only did the llamas look like a small horse, the ancient Peruvians used the long-haired llamas as pack animals or asses, while they used the short-haired llamas to ride, such as a horse. It is obvious that the ancient inhabitants of Caral were intelligent. They were advanced metallurgists, mathematicians, architects. They had a sophisticated government and advanced irrigation systems. None of these features existed north of Panama during the time of the Jaredites. Most important, the people of Caral believed in a god in the form of a man, a bearded, fair-skinned god who created their world. They called him the staff god because in most icons that represent him, he is holding staffs in both hands. President Spencer W. Kimball believed that the two staffs represented the stick of Judah and the stick of Joseph. In the figure on the left, you see that he's holding two staffs. This figure was carved in a gourd that was found in Caral that dated to around 2100 BC. It is the earliest known figure of the fair-skinned god in all the Americas. For these reasons and many others, I believe that Caral was the first home of the early Jaredites. Discover more about the Book of Mormon by subscribing to this channel, or you can visit our website, Christ in Peru. We can learn about our annual Book of Mormon tours to Peru, where we will visit Caral. I will be your guide.